Hello everyone, my name is Laura Villalobos, WESIS Community Manager, and I would like you to welcome you to this WESIS webinar. But before we start, I'd like to introduce you a little bit more about the WESIS organization. We often go by our acronyms WESIS as in We Sisters because that's exactly what we are, a global cyber sisterhood. We are a 501c3 with over 7.5 members in 70 countries. WESIS is a premier organization in global reach dedicated to bringing together women in cyber. Our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cyber. All of our programs and initiatives are made possible by supporting strategic partners. We have our professional affiliates, student chapters, equity advocacy committee, mentor-mentee programs, speaker bureau, job board, and so much more. You can view our training programs and initiatives at our website at www.wesis.org to learn more about different ways to get involved with the WESIS community. We all of our wonderful initiatives to our Tier 1 strategic partners, our Tier 1 partners being Akamai, Amazon, Battelle, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute, Cisco, Fortinet, Google, Lockheed Martin, Meta, Microsoft, Optum, Sandia National Labs, and Accenture. Reminder to ask questions throughout the webinars. You can put them in the chat and the presenter will answer them at the end. We have our experts here today and they look forward to hearing from you and your audience. Please subscribe to our WESIS newsletter at www.wesis.org to stay up to date for any upcoming WESI events and trainings. And with us today, we have Penelope to talk more about resumes, best practices. Penelope, I'll have you take it from here.
Hi. Thanks, Laura. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I am really happy to be here today. My name is Penelope Rozhkova, and I've been active with WESIS since 2020, I guess, like right as the pandemic was starting. And my first introduction to it was at a conference that was just a few weeks before we got shut down. But I have fallen in love with WESIS, and I'm so happy to be here. At the conferences, one of my favorite things to do is to sit in the career village and help out with resumes. So I am really excited to have this opportunity to have a little more reach. So basically, we're going to just do a quick overview of like basics for resume writing. There are a lot of other people out there who have different ranges of what they will suggest to you, and I kind of feel like I'm in the middle. A couple of other people that I would recommend looking at after this talk might be Kip Boyle if you want to look more on the side of writing for machine reading, and to Jason Blanchard if you want to be a little more innovative. Really? You can't hear me? Well, can I get some indication in the questions section if other people can hear me okay? All right, well, I'll just keep going then. So on the other end, there's a person named Jason Blanchard, and he talks about hacking your resume or your job hunt. And so he would be another person I would recommend looking at. But for our basics today, the things I want to cover are the 3 cardinal rules for resumes. So we're going to discuss know your objective, know your audience, and the details that matter. So know your objective. So sometimes I'll look at a resume and I look at it and I know this person wants to get into cybersecurity, but I have no idea what they want to do. And I'm not even talking about like that section at the top where you might put your objective, right? I'm talking about when I read through it, it's not necessarily obvious. So a couple of things that you want to look at with know your objective is, so if you need to, depending on how much space you have, include at the top of the resume what you're looking for or what you have to offer to the cybersecurity community or to that job post in specifically, right? And even if you have not worked in the field before, connect the dots, right? So when you're writing your resume and you're putting in the descriptions and maybe you worked for a landscaping company. And it might not be perfectly obvious what the relationship is between landscaping and cybersecurity. Fill in the dots for the person reading it, make it obvious. So make sure that when you are looking at what role are you seeking, that it's clear in the resume that that is the job you're going for. Kind of like that idea of like where people say like dress for the job you want to have. You have to dress up your resume for the job you want to have. Research the company, look at the company website, do research into news articles on them, look at the job listing that they provided, and make sure that your resume aligns with the job you want to have. Back to connect the dots again. So let's say you have landscaping and you want to do cybersecurity. You can talk about, you understand the importance of security in terms of the way that a property should be landscaped. And it's really easy for you to make those connections between physical security, which is part of our cybersecurity practice, as well as whatever. So kind of use the ideas that you have about what you've already learned, because I'm sure that you know what you learned in those previous jobs, but you may not be putting that forward on your piece of paper about how it applies to the role that you're seeking. And again, looking closely at the description of the job that you are interested in having, see how you can make those things align on your resume. Yes, that's how you spell Kip Boyle. Somebody asked about the name Kip Boyle, and then the other one is K-I-P, so B-O-Y-L-E, and then the other one that I mentioned was Jason Blanchard, J-A-S-O-N, and then Blanch, B-L-A-N-C-H-A-R-D. So I do have, somebody's asking if I have a resume. So I do have one that I thought about sharing. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this here. That's a little too small to read. So this is an example that I've used when looking for other resume reviewers so that I can get feedback from them about what they would say. And so this is not an example of a good resume that I'm saying this is what your resume should look like. This is an example of a resume that I may have gotten to review. And so we can do a quick run through of this at the end, and I'll kind of like just give you feedback specifically on this one. Does that sound good to people? So we'll get back to that. Let's go back to the slides. So know your audience. So this is kind of where I was talking about the suggestions for maybe like looking at something that Kip or Josh Mason, he's another person, might be recommending, or Jason Blanchard, right? Because if you're going to be using a resume to submit where a machine is going to read it, it's going to have to look different than if a human's going to read it. So for example, you should not have a lot of pictures or interesting formatting like columns or bullets or that sort of thing, it should be pretty much like a text page where you're just using maybe tabs and spaces to make a difference. Um, sorry, I'm having a hard time. I'm not good at multitasking sometimes. So the questions are popping up on the side and I'm talking to you at the same time. So I apologize for my distraction. So back again. So if you're talking to a machine is going to get really confused if there's a lot of graphic things on the resume. So you should probably have two separate resumes, one that you're going to hand to humans, which has to be visually interesting, versus one that you give to a machine where they don't care about that. They're just screening the text to make sure that things that they want are going to be in there. And you all may have had that kind of experience if you're using something like LinkedIn, where you're doing the upload of your resume from LinkedIn into a parser at the company where they're using that resume to like pull in your information. You're just like, oh, this is all wrong. So having a simple one that you can use for those purposes versus one that a person is going to look at should be very different. Again, who are you talking to specifically? So you should be updating your resume for each job that you are applying for. And it's very time consuming, right? Looking for a job is another job. It's full time and you have to dedicate the time to it to update your resume. Some places take cover letters, some places don't. I feel like it just depends on the place that you're sending it to. So make sure that you understand where you're applying and what their preferences are. Who's going to be reading the resume once you get it to that company? Is it going to be an HR person who is going to look at your resume based on something that someone else told them, and they're looking for those keywords that are in the job description? Another reason to make sure that your job aligns with the job description, again, is if it's a HR person who's looking at it who might not know all the ins and outs of the industry, they might just be looking to see if those things that are in the job description are showing up in your resume, which is similar to if the machine is reading it, right? They're looking for keywords. And be careful about putting keywords into your resume and making them white so that the machine picks it up, but it's not really there, because you want your resume to still be legitimate, right? So don't use any tricks to try and trick the machine just to get it past the machine. Make sure that it is still true. All right. And then let's look at details. The details matter. So remember the basics. Grammar and spelling count. And I tried to fix this silly slide so many times so that it would fit in here, because this is driving me crazy, right? And if I got a resume where my spacing looked like this, I would not be a happy person about my resume looking like that and getting one from someone where they didn't pay attention to this detail. So I apologize profusely for the fact that that R is not behaving. But grammar and spelling do count. So make sure that you are consistent with the way that you're writing your resume. If it's the present job, you can write what you're doing for that present job in the present tense because you are still doing it. But the rest of them, which happened in the past, should be written in the past. So this is what I did, or so, I worked in a SOC, right? Versus working in a SOC. So make sure that your tenses make sense for the situation. If you use one structure in one job description, make sure you follow through the rest. Not only for the way that you use the verbs, not only for the way that you are structuring the task, but also the formatting. So if you're not somebody who can like look at a page and see, oh, this font was different from this font, or this one's like half a point bigger than this one. Make sure that you are consistent throughout the document because there are people who do see those things. And if you're not one of those people, ask someone who is to look over your resume to help you catch any of those things. And I think it's always a good thing, regardless of how good you are at it. It's hard to see our own things. And I tell you, when I put something up on the screen and I'm sharing it with somebody, and I might have just been looking at it 2 minutes earlier, did not see it at all. And the minute I start to share it with someone else, I'm just like, oh, I didn't see that and I did see that. And so it's really important to get that second set of eyes. And I think it also does something in your own head of like when you're sharing it versus when you're in the middle of it to kind of even improve your own eye to see those things. Read through it for fluency. So I know it feels weird and sometimes it's uncomfortable and you're just like, this is ridiculous, but it really does make a difference if you read out loud. And you'll catch some of those things that you didn't realize were really complicated to understand in the way you may have written something. So read your resume job descriptions out loud and see if they make sense when you hear them out loud. And you can even, again, employ a partner if you have somebody who's willing to do that with you, and you can read it out loud to them, and they can also give you feedback. The other detail that matters, and it matters more for the human who's looking at it and the conversation that you're having. So if your person looking at it is a hiring manager, they're going to be interested in the metrics. So how many of this did you do? What kind of information or how broad of a company, what size of a company did you work for? How many users did you support? How many JIRA tickets did you process on a whatever kind of basis? Include meaningful metrics because your hiring manager is going to want to know what kind of actual impact you have. If it's something that you're just posting on LinkedIn or in some other public place, you may not want to put in those specific details. You can keep it a little more high level, but make sure that you have those details when you sit down for your face-to-face with whomever, or if a specific person asks for your resume where you're going to pass that over, make sure that you include meaningful metrics. I think this one didn't cooperate either. So there are lots of ways to say the same thing. I'm starting from the bottom and going up here. Use job postings to identify wording for use in your resume. Back again, making sure that you're looking at the job posting when you are sending that resume for that particular post. Make sure that they align. Again, because you don't know who's going to be reading it. You want to make sure that you, if they spell out Security Operations Center, then you want it to be spelled out in your resume. You don't want to just use SOC. Or if you're using both, make sure that you have it spelled out and then you have it in parentheses afterwards. There are lots of other ideas of like where they might word things differently, but they mean the same thing. So make it align, make it parallel with the job post, because it will be more apparent to whomever's reading it that your skills do align with what they're seeking. Another thing that I do is I keep a really long document. I think that my CV is probably like 15 to 20 pages, and I've not been good this past few years of like updating it, but keeping all of those pieces, right? So I'm saying here, update your resume for specific roles and companies. Well, take those snippets that you have and drop them into a comprehensive document so that you don't have to keep recreating the wheel, so that when you go to build the resume that you need specifically for this job, you can probably use things that you've already written from the other ones. Also, some of your experiences are not the same. So back again to like the overall like objective, right? You do not have to put your entire life history, and also depending on how old you are, For me, there's no way that I would put it there. There are also times when they say they don't want more than 10 years. So making sure that your document is relevant. You can just put related work experience. It does not have to be your entire life history. If you don't have, again, related work experience, then you can use the experience that you do have, but making sure that in your descriptions, you're showing how it is related to the role that you're going to be seeking. Also, the other document you want to keep track of, especially if, like I said, this is a full-time job for you where you're looking for a job and you can't remember, oh, I thought I applied to this company before. What was that role that I applied for there? Make sure that you're keeping track of what you applied for. And if you can, I usually try to print for myself whatever I'm submitting. I don't know if I'm ever going to get that option at the end, and I don't want to lose track of that data. So I usually try to print before I submit, just in case they're not going to give me the option to send me a copy of my answers. So then you can keep track of it, and then you can follow up on your resume, right? Because people are busy. And depending on what else they're doing, especially if it's a hiring manager that you're dealing with opposed to an HR person, that's not the hiring manager's only job. The hiring manager has other things that they have to be doing. And so they might have lost it in their email, right? So I know that if I'm away from my office for a period of time, it takes a little while to get caught back up. Or I might leave things unread in my inbox and plan to go back to them, but sometimes it takes me longer than I expected it to. So it's okay to follow up. And I would only do it a second time and then a third. And then at that point, if you're not getting feedback, then I would just kind of let it go. And I think it's okay to say that, I'll send an email that'll say something along the lines of, I just wanted to send this to you to move it to the top of your inbox in case you've lost track of it. And then that third time, I might be saying, I just wanted to touch back one more time to see if you're going to have an opportunity to look at my resume or whatever the gist is of the conversation that you already had with that person. And then check it off inside of that spreadsheet so you know that you've already done that. Maintain, so that's the spreadsheet. So all right, I think that covers all of those. I'm going to move over to the questions. So I could tell which direction these came in from. All right, so we'll go over that sample resume at the end. That was one of the questions. So it says, are you saying the objective of the resume should say what I'm looking for or have to offer? If I have no experience, that could get lengthy, and that would be in the cover letter. So it all depends on whether or not the company that you're applying to even wants a cover letter. So that's kind of why you need to know a little bit about their hiring processes if you can figure that out. You may or may not be able to. As a general rule, I generally do tend to send a cover letter and the resume. But if you have no experience, you should be able to, just like your elevator speech, right, which is 30 seconds in an elevator. Hi, this is who I am. This is what I do, and this is what I want to do. It should not be a novel. You should be able to come up with a way to say exactly those three things. This is me. This is what I hope to do, and this is what I have to offer. So if you Google Jason Blanchard, the question is, what do Jason and Kip do with resumes? They actually do what I'm doing now. They have videos out there on YouTube about how to job hunt and how to write the great resume. And it's a different perspective than mine. So I think it's important because we're not all the same. What works for me may not work for you. We're all in different places in our careers and wanting different things. So I'm talking to you based on my experiences. So I would just suggest that mine is not the only voice out there. Mine is not the only opinion. So looking at other people, Jason Blanchard, Kip Boyle, and Josh Mason, you can probably find articles from them also on LinkedIn or links to their work in this area. I have the question, what if the company uses occupational standards and doesn't have a detailed job description? Again, I would do the best that I can to align my resume with whatever criteria they are using. And so I've not ever experienced this. So I'm just going to kind of tell you what my sense of is regarding this. If I had a job description, a job listing, so under my experience, I would probably use occupational standards. Like I might bullet the occupational standards that I'm meeting if it's not too long. Like since it sounds like it's a bureaucratic document, it may not make sense to do that. But I would still do my best to make sure that whoever's using this rubric to judge my resume, when they look at my resume, it will align with that rubric. I have a question. Do people ask for references today? I think it kind of is a mix, and I think they oftentimes defer to a background check. If they like you well enough, they're going to do a background check, and they may or may not be talking to other humans that you've had experience with. So it's hard to say, but I will say that you do not put that on your resume. You do not need to put a section that includes references. You do not need to include a section that says references available upon request. That is like passe. That is not done anymore. So I don't know what the specific place that will call you will be asking for in terms of references. But I would say like the big corporations where I've interviewed and I've had been accepted, they did background checks. And so I think they use that more than references today. And I think your interviewing is probably going to speak a little louder than possibly the references. I'm trying to think of, it's been a little while since I've been job hunting myself, and I'm trying to think of like if it was even on applications. Maybe it was on applications, but if it is, that's where it's going to be, right? It's not part of your resume. Does it matter if you write out months versus using numbers when listing dates for jobs held, completion of education, trainings completed? I don't think it matters. I do think it matters if you're applying internationally or if you're applying in the United States, or if it's like maybe somebody who has like a military background. I think that it makes more sense to spell the name out, even if you just abbreviate it. So usually I only use 3 letters. So even if it's April or September, I'm only going to use APR or SEP just so that I have it there. And I tend to use words just because I think it's a little clearer and less confusing. But if you're having some sort of space issue or, you know, it doesn't appeal to you, you can go either way. But my personal preference is usually to do like the May 2020 versus 05/2020. So is there still a recommended page limit for the resume? So my personal opinion is no, because most of the time people are looking at things on, oh shoot, I'm already at time. So I'll answer this last question, and then Laura, is there a way for me to answer other questions, or can I just go over time? So is there still a recommended page limit for the resume? So again, because I feel like people just scroll through, there's not. I think what's most important, and I didn't say this up front, is that it's really important for the top half of your resume to give whoever's reading it, if it's a human, a reason to keep reading. Put your most important and compelling information at the top of the resume. And if they're interested, if you've captured their imagination from what you have at the top, then they're going to keep looking. And they may not read every single word the first time through, they're going to scroll through it. So it needs to be readable to the human eye. Like I said, depending on who you're writing for, you want it to be visually appealing versus not visually appealing. I think if you're putting the title of related job experience, that will deal with the idea of gaps of in employment, and then hopefully you get the interview and you can have a conversation. If you put related job experience, they're going to know that there may be other things that you've done that aren't listed on the resume. There are a few questions in here about how to align your LinkedIn profile with your resume. And I think that it has to be a whole other conversation, but definitely look and see what Jason Blanchard has to say about that. And again, somebody made the comment that humans do not read resumes. That's not true. There are a lot of places, including large companies. So for example, I work at Accenture, and a human touches all of those resumes. It's not combed through by a machine first. Okay, so I did share briefly, somebody wanted to ask if I could show a resume that is a good resume. I'm just going to share my resume, good or not good, it's mine. And I do feel like it's visually appealing. So for me, that's the way that I lean, opposed to writing for a machine. And I have a different style. And I think there are lots of ways to do it. I think that it's important for your resume to reflect your personality. So. If you only have a one page and you can keep it simple and it looks good and it has everything you need in it, then for sure do a one page resume. But if you're someone that's farther in their career and they have a lot of experience that is relevant to what they're applying for, then it can be longer than that. I'm sorry I could not get to all of the questions that were in here. I will do my best to see what I can do to answer some of them. Let me go back to the slides. I'll share my end page. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to reach me. If you're in Discord, that's okay. To reach out to me there. But wherever you reach out to me, tell me where you heard about me and why you're trying to connect with me. I don't know who's fishing on me, so like I really need to have a little bit of a reason to accept any sort of like friend or connection request. And that last little tidbit just as general information. If you're connecting with somebody, let them know why and how you found them. Right. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm sorry that I went a little bit over time, but hopefully it was worthwhile. And I look forward to hearing from people, and good luck with your resumes.